The first book of Achee, chapter 8. Note to the reader, the following chapters are particularly delightful as they concern the life of Messiah, and they come from a point of view that is seen through the eyes of an ancient man who was viewed as a wild man by his contemporaries because of his close walk with the Erkadershi, the Holy Watchers. They afford a glimpse of Messiah in two unique ways. First, from the perspective of the Holy Watchers, and second, from the and Thummim, which adds an element of reality that is often lost in man's attempts to romanticize the life of Messiah. This writing calls us to surmount our alienation from our Messiah and the Erkadershi, the Holy Watchers. Now it came to pass on the 5th day after Messiah was born of his mother, the men of renown hastened themselves, and they selected 7 of their most learned and diligent men, 4 of whom were high priests after the order of Melchizedek. And they prepared themselves and selected the ruins of an old settlement on top of a large hill just south of Bethlehem to dwell in. And it was called Netopha, which means to speak by inspiration. It is also associated with dew and morning mist and birthing ceremonies. And there they entered into a period lasting 4 years, when they instructed all the Erkadershi concerning the life of Messiah. And they did this at each sunrise and sunset, and these were called by them the birthing prayers of Messiah. For whenever a human soul is born upon the earth, in whatsoever land they be in, Messiah prays for them, and he instructs all the Erkadershi in their behalf. For the first 4 days of their life after their first breath, on the 5th day thereafter, that child is presented by him unto all the Erkadershi as a new living soul, who is now an element in their midst, and they are to view that child according to the manner of his instructions. This is called the vision of created purpose of this child, and it is of a certainty that Messiah has performed this act for every child that has entered the world in the flesh. Of every land, language, or religion, starting with Adam and Eve when they left the garden, even down until the very last human to be born upon the earth who finds breath. And these men knew that Messiah would have been the only human soul born upon the earth, having no one to perform this in his behalf. And in this thing it was altogether fitting that he should be so, for this task by Messiah was his first gift to his father in Jeshurun, and he gave unto his father, and thus it was 7 men, including 4 high priests, who in turn gave the Father the one who is called the Son of Man. And these men represented and spoke in behalf of all the righteous in the course of the earth. And it came to pass that they determined that they must labor 1 year for each day to accomplish this for Messiah. And thus they began to instruct all the Erkadershi, the Holy Watchers, with all diligence, and once a week, On a preparation day, young girls would bring food to them for the week, and the instructions of the men of renown to all the Erkadershi and their prayers were after this manner. The first year they rehearsed unto all them all his vision, that they knew from their sacred writings, and they kindled a sacred fire, and burnt upon it wood from the baka tree. And they prayed that he would be victorious in all the undertakings of his vision. And they instructed Deborah, a holy watcher, and all her hosts inscribed under her, to draw unto him in his worship all his days, insomuch that his prayers would be triumphant over every obstacle and over every act accomplished in darkness. And they used the strength of REU upon the coals in his behalf. And they directed Deborah to walk with him, and they declared that even the sunrise was told he will melt the shame of sin like the sun does the dew. For he was to be the light of the world, and he was to be the light of the world, the light of truth that proceedeth forth from the face of God, to fill the immensity of created life, and to light every soul upon the earth. In the second year they instructed Sariel and all her host, inscribed under her, that they would be his companions, and that all the waters would love him and teach him of their love, and that they should comfort him in all his trials and cares, insomuch that he would never feel alone or forsaken. And they instructed all the waters that they should give him the love of life, seeing he was the living water. And they carefully instructed the Erkadershi, the holy watchers, that they should guard to see that in all things in this life he could know the Father and all his desire fully in each and every need that Messiah would face. And they asked Kayal and Panel to obey him in all things. And they prayed for him, using the tree as the element upon the coals, for whence came the fruit Eve gave Adam. And they asked that Messiah would always be able to believe in himself, and that he could do all things whatsoever his Father should desire. In the third year, they instructed Ratastel and her host, inscribed under her, that the bread of life was come, and he would be a brother to the thunder, to see all the things were done according to the will of his Father. And they instructed the grass of the field, that they should fill his body of flesh and obey him, and multiply themselves according to his word, for he is a living feast to all the souls of the penitent, for he has come to cleanse and purify all mankind from their sins and their corruptions. And they reminded them that the God of Shabuah has come into the world, and accordingly all the Erkadershi and their hosts must be diligent to speak the language of repentance and the language of glory. And they instructed Malachi, and they viewed Mount Patak, that repentance had taken on flesh, and now walks in the midst of the proud. Therefore they should prepare themselves to sustain him. And in the fourth year they called the rocks to remembrance, and every rock of witness stood forth to declare him and the love of the Father for him. And these rocks were instructed that they should carry all their message of their fathers for the love of the Son into all the earth. And they requested that the rock of witness of Jacob should, in the life of Messiah, show forth judgment before the eyes of the people, and the rock of Abraham, where he established obedience of his heart, was informed by them that the Son of God was come. And those 7 men carefully commissioned all the host of Abedel that he had been born in a rock, and he would be buried in a rock. And they were charged to see that all the doings of Messiah would conclude with happy endings. The Messiah would be the rock at the end of every trial of every man, both rich and poor, small and great, wicked and righteous, sorcerer or holy man, even insomuch that in the end every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess the justice of God in Messiah. And they prayed that Messiah would find peace, and indeed even be the Prince of Peace. And many things did they call forth and instruct and pray for Messiah during these 4 years. And they prayed mightily, and that the Messiah could all his days be one with the Erkadershi, the holy watchers, for they knew that which was written concerning his marriage in the law of the temple. Now, the marriage of Joseph and Mary in its purity was the element for the joining of the Messiah with the Erkadershi, even according to the word of Enoch, and this joining was according to the vision of his created purpose, for it was the practice of the ecclesiastic, the set-apart gathering, but not so much in Israel, that there could be a time when a man could marry his wife and keep her a virgin until she was to take the covenant, or refrain from other reasons according to the rule of the community. Whenever this act of utter chastity and purity and discipline was accomplished, it was of such a holy nature, and it became a very powerful element to perform the joining of children in righteousness unto all the Erkadershi, the holy watchers. And thus it was that Mary became with child, while her husband was keeping her a virgin for some time, and Joseph knew he was not the father to the child, and he encountered the angel of the Most High in his struggles. But Messiah, more than any man, needed to be joined unto the Erkadershi, even in the likeness of marriage. The earth being the embodiment of his feelings in Shabuah, or that is to say, his rib. And the purity between Joseph and his wife was to be a very powerful element of righteousness brought to bear in his behalf. And it came to pass that Achee beheld the honor Joseph had in heaven in this manner, and Achee marveled in his heart that God could accomplish such great things. And he beheld that Mary was the rib of Joseph in the eyes of all the Erkadershi. And it came to pass that these men could view from where they were at Netzavah the regions of Bethlehem and Jerusalem and all the land of Israel, even unto Mount Patak. And they could see the salt sea and the great sea to the west of the land of Israel, and on a clear day they could see the blue haze in the distance of the land of the far country. And these men worshipped all during the time of the flight of Messiah there, and after his return. But all these profound things did not sway them away from their task, and they were exceedingly diligent, and they rehearsed their prayers and instructing words each sunrise in all weather every day of the year, and they would not be disturbed in their purpose. And they saw it that Messiah received the same love and care that he so diligently bestowed upon all the children of men upon their entry into the world. And Achee praised the Lord for the diligence of these men. And the Lord said to him, even so shall the same 4 years that are in the same likeness be performed in my behalf in the end of days, when I return in the flesh again. And it shall be performed by many, and it will be the first 4 years of my 1,000-year reign upon the earth. And it came to pass that Achee beheld Messiah when his little feet learned to walk, and all the Erkadershi rejoiced and were made glad, and they trembled with excitement for their very Creator, the one who covenanted to love and obey. And Shabuah was now walking upon the earth in their midst, and they could feel his little feet upon the ground. And they praised God that they could be a world to hold them. And never had the earth and all the Erkadershi felt such a great joy from that day of their creation. And it seemed to them that the feet of men going about the task of war and sorrow and corruption and sorcery and the wickedness was become of them unbearable. And the little feet gave them new life and a new hope and joy in their creation. And the wind was aware of him and discovered wherever he was and blew there to give him breath. And all the waters of the earth were filled with wonder. And they gave him to drink and bathed him, and all the Erkadershi offered the life in themselves as an offering to their Creator, who was now in the flesh among them. For they had only known giving their offerings to the image of God, and in that they found joy. But now they gave all their life to the giver of life, and their joy was full. And it came to pass that the news of his little feet spread among all the Erkadershi in the earth, but man in his blindness did not perceive it. Only the righteous upon any quarter of the earth, wherever they were found, could know the change in the hearts of the Erkadershi. And it came to pass that by the great wickedness of men, the little feet were obligated to flee for their life into the land of a far country. And they were gone from Israel. And all the longings of the Erkadershi for the vision of Israel was before their eyes. And the rocks cried out, and the rocks of witness at the gate of heaven proclaimed great things concerning Messiah to all the earth. And the alarm spread that the little feet of Messiah were not in the land of Israel. Now the knowledge of the ecclesiasta, the set-apart people, concerning Messiah was after this manner. The men of renown, Achee, knew day by day concerning all his doings and circumstances, for they were kept informed in order to direct the prayers of their watch. The rest of the Merari knew he was come, and those who had rendered service as Achee knew more of the circumstances of his doings. But while they were out among the people of the set-apart gathering, they used discretion and kept him on their minds, but their knowledge of his deadly circumstances was with them. The same way it would be for any child in the set apart gathering. The rest of the people and the rest of the people in the ecclesiastic, the set apart gathering, for the first few years, knew he was a son of Mary, and were exceedingly diligent with their discretion with the truth. But in their hearts there dwelt an excitement with the knowledge that Messiah was now in the flesh among them. And it came to pass that the new high priest of Shabuah in those days was called Zabdi, which means given of God, and his wife was the younger sister of Joseph, and she was called Shalom. And it was the policy of the ecclesiastic that no one should interfere with the life and the family of Joseph and Mary, but they should always discreetly cause some who were inscribed in the book of the Malachi to quietly dwell at all times near Messiah, in whatsoever settlement of Nazareth he should be found. And because of this, men of inscription accompanied them when they were led into the land of the far country. And it came to pass that the word was sent quickly unto Sakach, even before the sun was set, that the Messiah was fled for his little life. And Zabdi had been a high priest for only 3 months, and he was faced with this crisis. And it came to pass that Zabdi consulted the Lord with the Urim in the midst of the men of renown in Sakach, and the word of the Lord came unto him, and the Lord said, in their watch they should ask all the Erkadershi to protect Messiah from the designs of the king, who was called Herod, which means to behold the hero. And because of the absence of the little feet, all the Erkadershi were urgent to obey them, and there immediately fell upon the king a great loathsome humiliations and scourges and sufferings, and the air he breathed was against him, insomuch that his lungs began to shrivel, and the water was against him, insomuch that when he bathed, great scabs and a loathsome itch came upon his body, and the food he ate were baled to give him life, and his bowels decayed within his belly, and his private parts became purified upon him. And it came to pass that it was all the and it came to pass that it was as if all the Erkadershi spewed him out of their mouths. And in those days Herod died. And it was said by those who were close to him that he was the living dead. And all the people in Israel engaged in great speculations as to which of his many sins had brought these scourges upon him. But the people of the ecclesiastic knew which sin it was, and they were urgent before the God of heaven and the Erkadershi. And when he was dead, the Merari brought word to Joseph, and he returned with the little feet into the land of Israel, and once again took up his life among the settlements of Nazareth. And Regal was heard to sing songs of little feet. Now it was during these times that the Merari presided over the council of the community in all the land of Israel, and they were exceeding diligent in all their judgments, and in considering carefully which one would come to enter the covenant of the community. And in Israel, it was only the male children of rich and powerful who received formal learning and education with regards to reading and writing, and stone tablets ceased in Israel with the passing of Moses, but within the community of the ecclesiasta, the heavenly tablets were used for instruction since the days of Gokoharam I, and the community greatly encouraged all the people that they should be learned, insomuch that every male and female could have the advantage in their visions, in their virtue, in their pursuit of holiness, that they might come to understanding, and therefore better keep the law. And they all were taught of the knowledge of the truth and the understanding of his counsel. And it came to pass that young Messiah began his learning under the hand of his parents until the age of 7, and they taught him as any parents would who have sons and daughters in the class for children. And it came to pass that when Messiah was about to pass out of the class for children in the youth class, which was from 8 to 18 years of age, the men of renown selected learned men who would instruct Messiah and his companions, and it was determined that they each in their turn would instruct him during these 10 years. And these men felt the importance of the honor that was entrusted into their hands in instructing the Messiah of Israel in the religion of Shabuah, and they made their plans and prepared themselves with all diligence. And it came to pass that one day these things were getting underway, and Messiah and his mother were passing by the way, and they heard the shouts of a multitude. And little Messiah broke away from the side of his mother, and he ran to the midst of the multitude to discover the cause of the shouts. And when his mother came upon him, he was witnessing a stoning of a woman. And he heard a man say, "This is for the law, which says," and when he threw his stone, and the bruised and broken body of the woman lay upon the ground, and he viewed her as her last groanings had ceased, and Mary, taking him up by the hand, hastened him away from the place. And Messiah was greatly moved. And when he reached their home, he asked his mother, "Mother, by what law did they do this unto the woman?" And she said, "They have many laws by which they accomplish such things against the lives of the people, but I know not of which of the laws of Aaron they use to justify that which you witness this day." And she comforted him. And he said, "Mother, what was her sin?" And she shrank back from disclosing unto him the manner of fornication in Israel. And from that day on, the lad became intent on learning the ways of the temple religion, which thing was not the custom of the people of the set-apart gathering. And he determined to know of the sins of men. At first, his instructors supposed him to be distracted by his witnessing the stoning, but a year went by in this way, and he was not satisfied to learn of Shabuah. And it came to pass, he went across the way one day, and there he encountered a man who dwelt nearby, and he inquired of him according to the law of Aaron. And that man lent him some writings which contained the temple religion. And he brought them home, and he desired of his instructor that he might study them. And the instructor was horrified. And he inquired of the elders of Nazareth and Chinnereth as to how he should proceed. And he was informed, "Let them of of the firm determination of Messiah to study the law of Aaron, and it was decided that Messiah should be separated out from the midst of his class for a time, insomuch as the parents of the other children did not want their children to learn of the things. And the man began to instruct Messiah in the law of Aaron. And the men of renown were notified in Shecach that Messiah was being instructed in the law of Aaron. And Zabdi said, better that we should teach him, that the priests of the temple humor him while excuse me. Better that we should teach him, than the priests of the temple humor him a while, and the thing will pass. But Messiah could think of nothing else but to learn the law of Aaron and the sins of the people, and his instructor stumbled in his attempt, for he had never been taught in the law of Aaron, and in the diligence of his preparation he had thought only to shield Messiah from such things. And it came to pass that Messiah continually wanted to know more of the sins and the corruptions of the people, and he asked to visit the prisoners to inquire of them the concerning of their sins. And he would ask often to visit the temple when they were in Jerusalem, so he could view the sins of the place, and his mother forbid him. But he persisted until one day Joseph took him to the temple, and it was toward the end of his 9th year. And there he spoke with the money changers and the merchants of the offerings, and he asked them questions to see if he could discover their sins. And he openly inquired of the scribes concerning their sins, and they were irritated at him. And he remained all that day watching the priests of the temple and asking questions of his father. Now, it was custom among those who practiced the temple religion under the law of Aaron that they would gather on their Sabbath in reading houses to read from their writings. And Messiah was determined to go there to discover their sins, the sins of the people. And it was not according to the law of the community rule that a person of the set-apart gathering should do so. But he persisted in his questioning until his mother took him there on one of their Sabbaths, and he listened intently. And when they left, he asked his mother concerning all the sins of the people. And it came to pass that that thing became of concern to his parents and those in his settlement. For the people of the set-apart gathering were of a mind to shield him from such things, so that he could be holy and unspotted by occasion with the things of the world. Then one day, in his 10th year, Mary found him talking with a merchant in the street concerning harlots in the regions of the Gentiles. And his mother snatched him away from the man, and his parents began to be alarmed. And they requested the assistance of Zabdi and Shecach. And the second, the high priest, was sent unto Nazareth and Chinnereth. But before he arrived, the news was heard by Mary that the warriors of Kittim were bringing one bound along through the streets. And all the mothers made haste to gather up their children out of their sight. And when Mary sought Messiah, he could not be found. And her neighbor said, He is upon the housetop, for to see the Kittim with their prisoner. And he seeks occasion to speak with them. And Mary ran across the way, and got herself upon the housetop. And there she found him, viewing the Kittim as they passed beneath them. And when they were gone, she scolded him and said, "My son, restrain yourself, and only learn of the sins of Israel." And as they were passing on the stairway to enter the house below, he was weeping, and turned to his mother and said, "But mother, if I only learn of the sins of Israel, who will learn of the sins of the people of the nations? For my Father in heaven." And his mother embraced him and wept, and a foreboding entered her heart. And she thought, "Is it fair that my child should be burdened with the sins of all people? Are not the sins of Israel sufficient?" And at that moment, the high priest arrived from Succoth, and Joseph told him concerning the merchant in the street, and Mary told him concerning Messiah upon the housetop. And she rehearsed unto him the words of Messiah upon the staircase. And after he had been informed concerning all these things, he returned unto Succoth. And many there considered these things with alarm. And it came to pass that Zabdi inquired of the Lord by Urim. And the Lord spoke to him and told him that in these things be comforted, for Messiah will not go astray, to follow after the law of Aaron, nor after sin. But his Father in heaven was declaring great things unto him in his heart. And the people of the set apart gathering were chastened, for even in the midst of the set apart gathering, and with continual prayers of the man of renown, Messiah as a child was alone in his pursuit to fulfill the will of his Father. And immediately they all repented before the Lord, and a search was made to find one among the people of the set apart gathering who was learned in the knowledge of the temple religion. And they discovered a man in Jerusalem who had been a temple priest when he was young, and he had departed away from them and entered into the covenant, and he had been numbered among the men of renown for many years. But at this time he was too old to join in their doings, and his name was Latasha, which means one who instructs. And this old man had much knowledge of the law of Aaron and all the sins of Israel. And the woman who carried the purse in Nazareth of Jerusalem purchased for Lataa all the writings of the temple religion that spoke of these things. And she was ashamed in her heart that the substance of wealth from the storehouse of the Lord should be given for such things. But she was informed that it was thus decreed by the Urim and Succoth, and she was comforted. And it came to pass that Messiah at this time was 10 years old, and for the next 4 years he was instructed by the Tasha in the law of Aaron and in all the strayings in Israel. And he and Latasha became fast friends, and he abode near Joseph all the remainder of his days. And Messiah called him Master. Now, all these 4 years were spent in Jerusalem, for the men of renown had determined in their repentance that the family of Joseph should dwell there, for the completion of the learning by Messiah in the temple religion. And there were prisoners there, and Messiah visited them, for he would accompany Joseph when he went to purchase flour for their bread. And the prisoners labored for the high priest of the temple, grinding flour in the mills. And they were chained to the rods of millstones, and it was time to rest. Their keeper would remove them and allow them to sit by a basin of water and eat. Now, the young keeper was called Obed by the children of Israel, and he had become accustomed to Joseph and Messiah coming to visit the prisoners, and they would give them to eat of their fig cakes and butter and honey. And Messiah inquired of them concerning their sins. And one had stolen the cow of his neighbor, which was reserved for the temple. and he had stolen things many times before. And had he spat, and the wind had carried it upon the garment of the high priest as he was passing by, and the duration of his time to serve was 1 year, and he was young, and his name was called Eliezer. And Messiah loved him and prayed for him, and there was a bond of friendship. Now it came to pass that when these studies were completed, his family returned unto Chinnereth. And in those days Simyaza came hard against Joseph, and those with the influence in Chinnereth falsely accused him when a portion of a house fell down, and they said it was poor workmanship that had caused a man of grief of loss. And the men of the set apart gathering gave of their substance and their labor to remedy it for him. But Joseph knew it was Simyaza. At this time Mary had 6 children, and when Joseph had determined that his family was secure, he provided. When he decided that his family was secure and provided for in community, he went into Sycach to serve with the men of renown and to gain strength for the task of his life. And in this way the efforts of Simyaza were turned away from his family. And the desire of Messiah in his youth to know about sin did not abate, and they taught him concerning all things, starting with his grandfather Israel, when he established Jeshurun for his people, and commencing down unto his own time. And they taught him concerning the Decadertroi and their pollutions. And it came to pass, when he was 12 years old, he went into the temple without the knowledge of his parents, and when his family was in Jerusalem, and there the men of the place, who were very learned, sat about in a public place, to seek occasion before all the people to expound upon their much knowledge. And the people would ask them questions, and they would display their learning with great swellings. And on this day they found Messiah before them, and they knew he was of the private sect of Nazarenes by his manner of dress. And he began to question them, and they were astonished at him, for he knew of their law. And Messiah was inquiring of them concerning their strayings, and he would recite their law to them, and ask them why they did not do according to the manner and that was prescribed in their law. And many of the men could not answer him a word, and they were all much embarrassed before him and one another because of him. And it came to pass that the next day was a public day, and the men were again assembled to hear the inquiries of the people concerning important matters. But Messiah was again before them, as he passed the night in the temple, and they were discussing who among them should answer his questions, for a crowd had gathered, and they shrunk back from answering him before the multitude. And when they were about to despair for who should answer him, his mother came and got him and took him out of their midst. And it came to pass that when he was 14, and for the next 2 years, he learned about the sins of Kittim and all the wickedness of the people of the far country. And in those days Joseph had a brother in the city of Joppa, which was beside the great sea, and there were many merchants and much traffic from the nations. And the brother of Joseph labored among those who tended the loading ships. And there were many people of the nations there, and many languages were spoken. And Messiah lived with his uncle for a season in Nazareth of Joppa. And while he was there, his eyes beheld the wonders of the world and the sins of the nations, and his understanding increased before his Father in heaven. Now, in Jerusalem, the people of the set-apart gathering could not renew Shabuah year by year, as the people of the temple religion did not keep the same Sabbath, and the sounding of the trump of summons, when it was not their Sabbath, would cause a great uproar. So they were obligated to renew Shabuah in Sukkot, also in other various places in Israel, where the people were familiar with the people of the set-apart gathering, and would accept the sounding of the trump when it was not their Sabbath day. And in the 16th year of Messiah, he heard for the first time on the Sabbath morning at sunrise the sounding of the trump of summons for Shabuah. And Messiah was much moved upon the sound of it, and it pierced him to his very center. And he cried out and hastened himself to see. And the thing so moved him that the elders of the place, when they heard of it, they sent for the men of renown in that place. And it was decided that he should go in the company of his fellows, who were his youthful companions, and they should go into Sukkot for the duration of the weeks of Shabuah. And the men of renown were there, where the men of renown there could teach him, and he could learn from Zabdi all the things concerning Shabuah. And word was sent ahead that Messiah was coming to Sukkot for the renewing of Shabuah. And the men of the place made haste to purify themselves, and set all things in order. And therefore the rest of the 7 weeks Messiah and all his troop were instructed in the manners of Shabuah, and they commenced with the war in heaven, and expounded unto them all the things. And the men opened up the knowledge of the city of Enoch, and they rehearsed the establishment of Shabuah, and all the history of their religion with Shem, and said to the Quilab. And every Sabbath morning Messiah would accompany the trumpeters at sunrise, and thus the 7 weeks passed. Now, all this time the men of the place were careful to ascribe Shabuah to the Son of God, and they durst not mention the Messiah of Israel. And they rehearsed the covenant of Shem by saying the Son of God should be in and through all things, and that all the Erkadersi should obey the Son of God. And they chose their words carefully, so as not to burden him with their expectations of him. And he observed the renewal of the covenant of Shabuah as one of the faces in the multitude who witnessed it. And he watched the dancers of the song of Eve and the blessing of the altar, and his heart was moved. And Zabdi was constrained to the altar, and was constrained to alter the words of his proclamation as the high priest of the covenant, not to say the word Messiah, but to say the Son of God. And after Messiah witnessed all these things, and it was over, and they were in the midst of the feast, Messiah said to Zabdi, I go a-walking. And he left alone. And Zabdi, seeing him going off alone, sent 2 young men of renown to follow after him at a distance, and to keep him in sight, and thus watch for his welfare. Now neither Messiah nor the men who followed him took provisions, and Messiah took his journey with rapid pace for 3 days, and went beyond Ajedi unto the wilderness of Pisgah. And there, in a large cleavage of the earth, he dwelt for the space of 10 days, while he fasted and prayed, and pondered all he had beheld in Shabuah. And there was a spring of water down by the way that ran on the way toward the salt sea, but it dried up in the sand, and there he would go for water each day. And on the 10th day he came early to the water, and he found the 2 men who were sent to watch after his care. And he said to them in surprise, "What brings you, brethren, hither?" And they answered, "We were sent to watch out for your welfare, and we intended to stay at a distance to not disturb you. But you came upon us here at the water." And the Lord said, "How do you fare?" And they answered, "We have had no food for these 13 days, but water only." And he gave them bread to eat, and they knew not from whence it came. And it came to pass that they returned unto Succoth, the Lord having compassion on them for their fasting. And when they returned, a meal was prepared. And after they bathed, they sat down to eat. And Messiah said to Zabdi, and in the midst of the meal he leaned over to Zabdi and looked upon him, and he said, "Master, who is the God of Shabuah?" And Zabdi, filled with the Holy Ghost, and could hardly speak, and he replied, "The Messiah of Israel." And Messiah answered him not a word. But when he returned home, his parents declared that he left a boy and returned a man. And after therefore he became serious and sober of mind, and he plunged into his studies of the religion of Shabuah with great interest and great diligence. For the next 4 years he visited many of the settlements of Nazareth, and he spoke with them, and he ate with them. Thus he spent the next 12 years being active in his studies and ministry in the set-apart gathering. And after he entered into the covenant of the community at age 20, he did his part and performed ministry in the set-apart gathering, for he loved to teach those who were preparing to take the covenant, and those who sought the way to lean to the joys of repentance. And it came to pass that in his 20th year he and John, the son of Zacharias, and the band of his youth, with whom he was raised, came to Succoth to enter into the covenant. And these were happy times for Messiah and the people of the community. Now it was in Succoth year by year at ingathering that any who would enter into the covenant must come, and Succoth was set aside as the only place in Israel where a person could enter into the covenant. And in this way every person in the set-apart gathering had visited Succoth at least one time in their lives, and the ceremony was performed each year on the Sabbath of ingathering. And all who wish to take the covenant must come before the council of the community in full assembly in Succoth to gain permission to enter into the covenant. And all the people knew Messiah was come with his fellows. And one was heard to jest another and say, "Should we approve Messiah to enter into the covenant?" And the other replied, "If he is not suited, then there is not a man in Israel who has entered it worthily." And every man realized that Messiah of Israel had come for to enter into the covenant of the community. And they all were diligent before the Lord when it came to his time to stand in the line of inscription. He chose to go last behind all the others. Now it was past the season of rain, but clouds had gathered that morning, and Zabdi and all those who were assembled beheld him, as a lock of his hair was cut to be used as the element of righteousness in preparation for him to stand alone before the altar. and it was the first of his hair to be cut in his lifetime, even as it was for all those raised up within the church, and they all bore the record that he stood forth and witnessed before his Father in heaven that he would love him with all his heart, might, mind, and strength, and he would love him utterly, and do all things according to his word to him. And he would do all things that the Father revealed to him according to the desires of his heart. When he placed his hair upon the coals of the altar, and as the smoke ascended, lightning split the sky from the west to east, and the thunder shook the earth, and the song of Israel sang unto his rock of witness was heard to come from above and beneath, and it filled the ears of all who were present. And some even said, who were traveling in the way, that it was heard resounding in the cliffs in the wilderness. And the Lord had his sleeves rolled up, as he had been helping in the task of the morning meal, and he had forgotten to roll them down for the ceremony. Now each one who attended was very desirous to be proper for the seriousness of the ceremony. And Mary, his mother, who looked on him, was embarrassed that his sleeves were rolled up. At that time, Messiah had finished, and the thunder had sounded. Zabdi stood to make his declaration, to read from the sacred writings. For it was according to their custom that the high priest, who is inscribed, first should speak, after the last one entered into the covenant. And he chose to read in Isaiah, where it said, Who hath believed our report, and whom to his arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of a dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows, and acquainted with grief, and we build, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he hath borne our griefs, and carried our sorrows. Yet we did not esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. All like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed, he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? For he cut out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was stricken, and he made his grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth, yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. He hath put him to grief. When thou shalt make his soul a sin offering, when thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin, He shall see his seed, he shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand, and he shall see the travail of his soul, and he shall be satisfied. By his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. Thereafter will I divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he hath poured out his soul unto death. And he was numbered with the transgressors, and he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. And it came to pass that for those who had the ears to hear it, could be known that the arm of the Lord was in their very day being made bare before their eyes. And Zabdi in this manner and in his wisdom sought to prepare the set apart gathering for the task that lay ahead for Messiah. And the set apart gathering, for many had come complacent and had begun to expect the ministry of Messiah would be theirs all his days, and perhaps he should die of old age. The set apart gathering having had him themselves all his days. Thus Zabdi troubled the waters, and called the set apart gathering and those on watch to all diligence. For the set apart gathering had called forth the arm of the Lord, and he now was in their midst. And they all would be subject to the joys and the sorrows of his task. And the people of the set apart gathering were shown plainly the difficulty of the task that lay before their Messiah. And it came to pass that the men on watch began to gird themselves with righteousness, and they sought the stones in the wilderness. And Achee greatly marveled that Zabdi should so plainly unfold the words of prophecy to the task of Messiah before the eyes of the people. And all the multitude in the set apart gathering began to wait and wonder as to how all these things might be brought about. And it came to pass that in the 8 years that followed, Messiah ministered before the face of the community, as any man of renown would, and he preferred to teach those who were preparing to enter into the covenant, and he healed many by purifications. And in those days Messiah and John dwelt in Succoth, and he would only purify in the pool of Eden. Now the pool of Eden, where the celestial waters first entered Succoth, was considered the pool of novices. And when they asked him why he would not purify in the other pools, he replied that his task in those dispensations would come soon enough, and he desired to rest in the waters of Eden. And it came to pass that his wisdom was great in the eyes of the community, for he taught and acted with all diligence and care, and was firmly in control of all his behavior. And in those days many among the Merari were revealed to see him firmly in the covenant and safe within its confines. One day Zabdi approached a group of people who were discussing the doings of Messiah, and some said he should have learned about Shabuah in his childhood, and about sin as a man. And Zabdi spake unto them, and he said, Herein lies the great wisdom and mercy of God. For Messiah learned of the sins of men when his heart was tender with years, and he beheld with the eyes of a child. For this reason He shall always look upon those who suffer with their sins with the tenderness of a little child, and his compassion shall engulf those who have corrupted their own way with false religions and the lust for power. And in the innocence of his charity shall exceed all bounds before the eyes of the wicked, and all among the wicked, even kings and rulers, shall say, at last we see no cunning nor malice in him, and in his innocence shall be before even the eyes of his enemies. And when they do whatsoever they will to him, they are compelled to say, they unjustly accused one who was without guile, and his childlike innocence in the face of sin and wickedness is that which will empower him with great power, even so much that except for the wicked of the temple, he may turn to the whole face of Israel unto their God. And it came to pass that the years passed by with him ministering before the set apart gathering until his 28th year. And his ministry could have endured in this manner amidst the set apart gathering for years. But in his 27th year, the conditions set forth in the law of the king that would indicate that it was time for him to act began to manifest themselves. And the set apart gathering was faced with a time of decision, for it could be discerned that the mood of all the people in Israel was to search to find the means to return unto the Lord and to achieve holiness of heart. And this was not the condition of a few years before the Messiah, nor would it be just a few years after. So Zabdi saw that it was time to act according to the word of the Lord and the law of the king, and these conditions that called forth the public ministry of Messiah were brought about by the oppressions of the Kittim and the blatant wickedness of those held in esteem by the temple religion. But the priest in Jerusalem and all his band were not aware of this change in the hearts of the people, and they sought to preserve their possessions of esteem and their ability to get gain. And they supposed in their hearts that they would abide their time until they could throw off the yoke of their oppressors. And thus was the way prepared that Messiah would be a dire threat to them, for he had the ministry and the opportunity to answer the needs of the people searching for purity. And should Messiah teach them the way of repentance and persuade them to love the God of Israel and embrace all things pure and holy, those in power would lose their great positions and be compelled to change their religion and the traditions of their fathers, and to labor for their own support and be humble before all men. But Semyaza did not shirk back in the face of it, and he put into the heart of the high priest of the temple, who was called Caiaphas, whose name means to be depressed, that he should begin to teach and declare that their law of Aaron was indeed their nation and the vision of Israel, and that the people should be persuaded to follow after the Torah of Jeremiah and abandon their law, they would lose their nation and their place as a people to dwell upon the earth. Now it came to pass in the 28th year of Messiah, Zabdi called for a council and grand assembly, where the councils of the communities in all of Israel should be assembled in Shekash to determine how Messiah should proceed. And Joseph began to be old, and at that time of this assembly he was ill, and he requested that he be carried unto Shechem to be present for this decision. And there, after all things were accomplished in their decision, he died, being 75 years old, and he was buried in Shechem. And here was the great man whose marriage had been the element of righteousness to join the Messiah with the Erkadershi, the holy watchers, and he had passed unto his Maker. And it came to pass that John began his ministry at that time, but Messiah remained at Shechem, and he was diligent to keep the law before his Father in heaven. Now there were times that Messiah would grow weary of the close walls in Shechem, and he would long to be out among his beloved Erkadershi, and he would slip away alone to the alarm of many, and he went beyond Jordan unto the regions of Jabbok, and he prayed in the cave of Elijah and Gokaharam the first, and he visited the clay yard of Achab, and he discovered the hill where the records were hidden in the cavity of the rock, and he communed with all the Erkadershi, and they loved each other with a great love. And in this manner Messiah would slip out alone and be gone for many days, alone with his beloved Erkadershi, and those charged with his care were obligated to leave him in the hands of God, and all the Erkadershi taught him the use of the element of righteousness. Now all the people of the set apart gathering carried upon their person the element of righteousness, and when they traveled they carried it, and it was exceedingly holy and delightful to all those who loved repentance. At first Messiah carried his sacred element upon him as he traveled, but in these 2 years that preceded his public ministry, that he largely spent among the Erkadershi, he found that they loved him so much and had such a great bond with him that when he needed the element of righteousness, it would come to him. It would come unto him whenever he was. And if he needed the colored dust of the earth for paint, it would be there for him. Or if he needed the feathers of birds, or plants, or stones, or fish, it would be there for him, according to his needs. And all the Erkadershi will be joined with him every moment of his days, and they would nourish him, and love him, and speak to him. And he always knew what the rocks, the wind, and the hills were thinking, and they were interpreted each present moment for him, and in this way guided him in a very beneficial way. And there were many times that they nourished him and fed him, much like Adam and Eve were fed in the Garden of Eden, even so much that he was heard to say, I have meat and drink that ye know not of.